Hey everyone, this is Caroline. I had a whole video set up which was going to share this week's channeling, and I haven't been able to download it. Canva is behaving very strangely. So I'm just going to quickly talk about what's in the channeling, and then I'll refer you to the written form of it, which might be best anyway. And all the energies of that channeling will be present. But I was mainly pointing out to particularly three ascended masters, Lady Masters Portia, and also Lady Master Nada and Lord Sananda Kumara. I was asking for their input on what happened with the election this past week, and just saying the whole thing feels very shaky, very fraudulent to me. A lot of people, millions of people, have had questions about whether our elections really are elections. And I don't just mean all the illegal use of hundreds of millions of dollars, bribery, gerrymandering, some election officials saying they'd only certify the election if it went to their favorite candidate, and on and on. There's things on the surface that are obviously wrong, but I feel that there's a lot under the surface as well that represents not democracy, but the oligarchy, and unfortunately, corporate ownership of what you and I call a democracy, which amounts to fascism. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I hate this guy who's claiming to win. It's not really about that. It's about transparency and honesty in our election process, and then looking at ourselves as a people and asking ourselves, what is our dark aspect that someone who loves violence and chaos and has promised to deport millions of people and to stand in utter defiance of human rights and among other crimes, who's himself a known criminal, a convicted criminal. How is it that that person has come to the top of this country? Who's really in charge, and what's really going on with each of us inwardly, that our shadow aspect is showing up so powerfully? And it's really beautiful in this channeling. They say, yes, indeed, you're right, that presidents, along with prime ministers, chancellors, etc., are generally chosen. Apparently they're elected, but in reality they're chosen by the old power structure. And they add, now, are we saying this to antagonize his supporters or draw defensive anger from them? No, we're not. But the electoral system in the United States has always suffered the kinds of inequalities and interferences that render outcomes sometimes unpredictable and too often fraudulent. Now, that's not to say every single election has been completely wrong and stolen, and it hasn't. But I consider it a kind of miracle these days when we have an honest election anywhere, because it's not really that hard. Unfortunately, our electoral system is very weak and not well guarded, and it doesn't self-identify as something that's fair. It identifies with one particular party or the other, and then it's run by people who apparently don't have to answer to anybody. And there will be investigations here and there, but no real action overall that stretches into the next election. So they're pointing out very deep, long-reaching shadow of colonialism, economic inequalities, slavery or wage slavery, the dehumanization of certain groups and races, and the oligarchical nature of our economic system, where just a small, tiny minority tend to run things. And so, yes, there are democratic ideals, but is that what's being followed? No. And they're saying the source of all of these is the darker side of old earth machinations. Now, if you're listening to our wonderful friends, the White Knights, the Ashtar Command, their contacts are saying, yes, you're still in the third dimension to a degree. There's an overlap. The fifth dimension is coming in powerfully. Absolutely, it is. And this is one reason why we're seeing the fourth dimension, which is time, shifting powerfully. You notice time runs very, very quickly these days. But there's a slight overlap. We're still in some ways seeing the old timeline, playing out and still expressing itself. And meanwhile, the fifth dimension is coming in. So it looks like, well, are we at cross purposes with ourselves? We are to a degree, but there's so much about the darker side in each of us, as well as in us as a country, and us as the human race, that has to come up. And this is, as they call it, a very great unveiling. It's important that we allow the dark side to come up so we can face it and purge it out of our systems as individuals and as groups. And that sounds absolutely dreadful, I realize. And my question has been this past week or so, how many people are going to have to die for not getting the medical help they badly need, or end up homeless or without income like Social Security or disability? How many people are going to have to suffer in the mass deportations? And they've said they're going to try to deport the children, even the grown children of those who came in illegally. It's a very dark plan. And the fact that they got the evangelical churches behind them, that's a whole other issue. I come from that background, as most of you know, and I know all the triggering phrases and the word magic and all of the entrancing and entraining aspects of that whole philosophy. So I'm not saying, oh, if you voted Republican, you're an awful person. Not at all. I am saying let's come out of our separate camps and start to realize what's happening here. So I encourage you to look at this channeling, because, you know, they're saying, yeah, when your preferred candidate doesn't make it into office, it's easy to feel that all of that is lost and dissolved somehow, all those beautiful principles that they wanted to instill and install into our system. And they're saying, yeah, we would say, how is it lost, that path of higher intent, when the vibration of honoring human rights is still present within all of you? How is it lost when all of you are anchoring that light that you had invested in one party and their candidates? It didn't begin with them, but it began with all of you who called them forward. And how can it be lost when there are so many now who are awakening and leaping into action all the more now to protect innocent lives, protect civil rights and freedoms, and the earth herself? So I think you might find it interesting to see what they're saying. They never allow us to wallow in passivity or shock or rage or grief for very long. And they say, yes, okay, if you feel those things, let it out. And I was just in a beautiful meeting online held by Anastasia Frank, who is this absolutely brilliant coach for relationships and for business, particularly for women. And she said, just if you start just sort of punching the palm, punching one hand in the palm of the other, you're going to be surprised probably by how much anger comes up. And I was surprised. Probably that wouldn't be too good to do forever. Hit a sofa cushion, hit a pillow, let it out. This grief doesn't only belong to this moment. This rage doesn't only, and shock don't only belong to this moment. They've been in us for eons. They've been something we've traveled through many, many times. And it's coming up now so we can finally release all that trauma. And as we release it in ourselves, friends, we release it for our whole bloodline, and we open that door for the whole populace, all the masses behind us, to start asking the real questions. Because this nonsense about political parties and teams and separations, look, there's dark machination behind all of it. And I'm not saying the parties are identical, because they're not, but we are not yet liberated. We are not yet free, but we will get there. So I'm sending much love and huge blessings. I'm thanking you for having the bravery to have come in and live an earth life at this time, and just blessing all, whatever your path is. We send love. Namaste.